Welcome to my Meet the Horses video. Finally, it's going to be done in chronological order, so here we go. Bit of a backstory, I actually had 2 ponies before I moved on to horses, and I had a bit of a break after ponies before going on to horses, and I started having lessons at a riding school, which is how I met this guy. So here we have Mr. Ed, aka Fathead. He's a 15-1 Irish sports horse. Don't really know what attracted me to him. I think I was just desperate for a horse, if I'm honest. The first time I ever saw him, he was violently head shaking and bouncing around in a lesson. Definitely not the ideal first horse, as he was a violent head shaker and very, very riggy. But as this video continues, you will see when I get a soft spot for a horse, all common sense goes out of the window. Like all tricky horses, he did teach me a few things. He taught me to have soft, quiet hands, a quiet seat, and that sometimes it's good to go back to basics. I think when I got him, he had a pony martingale on and a pony flash noseband, which obviously isn't the best thing for a horse that's prone to head shaking, but we live and learn. So yeah, took all that off, went back to basics. Not a dressage horse, as you can see, but we had a go at a bit of everything, just had a bit of fun. I also had one of my worst riding accidents on Ed, thankfully not on camera. I don't think I would have been able to watch it. We went to a local unaffiliated show, and the next thing I know is he was, well, I don't know, I was unconscious for about, I think, over an hour. Is that he was on top of me in the viewing gallery, so that was fun. Amazingly didn't break anything, but I did have a serious head injury, and I was advised not to, I can't remember the time scale, but it was a long time. They said to not do anything stimulating, so don't watch TV or read, etc, etc. And obviously if they're telling me not to read or watch TV or not really get out of my bed for a while, riding was completely out of the question. But prior to this, me and Ed had qualified for this little county show. Well, it wasn't a little county show, it was a big county show. We only qualified because I think we were the only people in this class. So being me, I made the decision that if I didn't get back on that horse, I probably wouldn't ride again. So here we are at the Ipswich County Show, going round a course of jumps, which, by the way, wasn't what we qualified for. We actually qualified for a showing class, but I decided to go around a course of jumps in a snaffle on a horse that almost killed me. And I also told my mum, who was very, very against it, might I add, that I was only going to keep the lady at the yard that had qualified company, and I was just going to literally just sit on him at this show, keep her company, have a plod around, and it gradually escalated over time. So I think it was actually maybe a week exactly after I nearly died, belting around a county show. So there you go. P.S. Not that it matters, but we did actually win our jumping class, which was such a good feeling, and to this date I think probably the best money I've ever won. So yeah, he got a nice bag of treats for that. But as time went on, with Ed, I think it might have been when he was around 14, 15, things started just not being quite right with him, and I just felt like he wasn't comfortable, wasn't sound. So I got a few different opinions, and he had chronic arthritis in his neck, and I think as well he had it in the 3 legs out of 4, not great. So I was given the option really that he was either to be PTS or he could be a happy hacker, and as you can probably see from those videos, he wasn't really the happy hacker kind. So we decided the kindest thing for him was to retire him, and that's where he still is now, causing chaos in his late 20s, living his best life. After Red, I had a little break from horses, and then I was on the hunt for a new horse, and I went to see a few, but then this guy caught my eye. Mr. Jigsaw, as known as Aragorn, also known as Gollum, he is a 15-2 Irish sports horse. He was 7 when I got him, and this was taken on the first day of owning him in his stable, which was number 14, and we got him on Valentine's Day, which is also the 14th of February. And within the first month of owning him, I came off him twice. On the second time, I fractured my shoulder because, as I now know, Aragorn has got a party trick which throughout the years continued to make an appearance. So after that little break, I got back into it and we took him to his first ever show, which was this one. It was a showing show. Not really sure why I decided to go showing. Haven't done it since I had ponies and I'm not mad into it, but I think someone from my yard was going, asked if I wanted to go, and I was like, yeah, why not? So we went, and yeah, he was good as gold. Nothing to report there really, other than in hindsight I look hideous in a tweed jacket. So round of applause for all the girls that can pull off a tweed jacket. Then we had a go at dressage. As you can see, Aragorn's got a habit of looking anywhere except for where he's going. And I think that was probably, other than one that George got, this was one of my worst ever scores to date. And I won't lie, it just put me off dressage for about a year. I think I didn't do a dressage test for a year after that. So then we just got into our jumping and just doing a little bit of everything else other than dressage. And I think after that, I just really took a lot of time in just trying to get to know Aragorn, just trying to, you know, spend as much time with him as I could, do different things, and just to try and grow and become a stronger team.
Hey, come on, babe! Come on, Aragon! The blue and red one's first, babe.
And shortly after that, I moved yards, which is where I met my trainer, and he just really understood us, and I think we just got on really well together. He changed my way of thinking, which changed my way of riding, which ultimately changed Aragorn's way of going, and I just believe that that was just the turning point in our relationship, really. And we just really started to step up and just have some fun. We were jumping meter classes, I did a few novice dressage tests, and yeah, we were just literally having the best old time and learning a lot. And that's not to say that it was all plain sailing from there. I actually, this is where I knocked 5 of my bottom front teeth out, and they're still, I think it's how long later? It's like 5 years later, still being held together by a splint. And after owning Aragorn, I think it was around 2 years after, I decided to look for another horse. Not sure why, but there we go. And I actually went to look at a Connemara, and that didn't go very well at all. The woman actually put her foot in the stirrup to get on and just show me, show me the horse being ridden. And yeah, that didn't go great. And because we were so far from home, I thought, while we're here, let's have a look and see what else is around. And that's when I stumbled across a little 15-2 warm blood who looked a bit sorry for himself. And at this point, all common sense goes out of the window, because I was like, oh my goodness, his name's A-Team, it's my favourite Ed Sheeran song, and he's got Peter Pan breeding, and that's my favourite Disney film, and it's just a sign, and it's meant to be. And if I'm honest with you, if most normal people saw a horse in this condition, they would run 1,000 miles in the opposite direction at a very high speed. But me being me, I fell in love with the horse that I met, and I wanted to get him off that yard ASAP. And that's exactly what I did. Here he is a few days later in my friend's borrowed travel rug, and he came back with us. And as you can see from these photos, he was underweight. He had a terrible coat. He was covered in scars. His pelvis was out, and we later learned he had half his teeth missing. And if you look at his eye, he always had a worried eye. And later on, I learned why he was so suspicious and nervous around people. But thankfully, Aragorn really looked after Bentley. He showed him the ropes and he taught him how to be a horse. And I think it just filled him with confidence and he just started coming out of his shell a lot more. So obviously, after learning how bad Bentley was physically, we had his pelvis treated. We had his ulcers, which were some of the worst ulcers that our vet had seen, treated. And that's when we learnt that he had actually had half his teeth on one side were missing, where he'd been, you can imagine, quite a force to his mouth. And once we had all of that sorted, I started riding him. And hopefully you guys can see he starts to look like a completely different horse, just a lot happier and a lot healthier. Funny story, Bentley was actually bred to jump. Here are some of his relatives, but Bentley was terrified of poles. I think I forgot to mention he was 9 when I got him, and it came to light as time went on that he was probably so scared of poles because he was wrapped by the people that I bought him from. Although when he did jump, he had an incredible jump, but to be honest with you, I always knew that it was going to be highly unlikely that I would ever be able to take him out to compete just because of how highly strung he was. And it didn't really matter all that much to me just because he was the sort of horse, he made you feel like royalty when you rode him. Like, I can't describe it, and only 2 people ever rode him and they felt the same, like he was such a special little horse. But also the most challenging horse I have ever sat on. So yeah, while I was riding Bentley, I was still riding and competing Aragorn, knowing that I wasn't going to be able to compete Bentley, but that was fine. And it was then that I decided, if we can't go to a show, we'll do a show at home. So I entered one of the online dressage competitions. Just because the jumping wasn't working well for us, it was just stressing him out, and I was ending up with either a tail in the eye or an ear in the eye every time we jumped. So I thought, let's stick with dressage. What could possibly go wrong? And that's when this happened. So I was just going around the arena as normal, and Bentley stood on his back legs. And usually when he does that, it used to be have a little rear and then a buck. But this time he sort of reared and just went over, and I landed on the fence, like my back landed on the fence, and I was out cold and spent the night on a spinal board. And I don't want to be sued here, I'm just telling you my story. It was then that I found out that the people that I had bought Bentley from and a vet associated with them were being sued. Actually, at that point, I think they were in prison, but they were in prison for a long time, considering. I'm not going to go into the justice system, but yeah. And it just gave me a bit of a kick up the bum, if I'm honest with you, because I wasn't the only one that it had happened to, and someone was actually paralysed from one of the horses that they'd sold to them. Similarly, they'd sold me Bentley as a mother-daughter share, which obviously I knew he wasn't, but I am just grateful that I ended up with him because he's my absolute world. I would do anything for him, and I would just hate to think of a child on a horse like that. And then, can you believe, a week later, this happens. This time it wasn't an Aragorn party trick, it was a rotational fall, and I fractured my shoulder. So literally a week to the day after I was in hospital on a spinal board, I was back in there again. And these are probably the 2 falls that are still affecting me now physically. So my shoulders are still not great, and my back is absolutely shattered. But we live and learn. If I'm honest, it just really made me think that Bentley was 9 when I got him. He had never ever seen grass, and hearing of his and the other horses' treatment at the hands of the people that I bought him from, it just made me think he owes the world nothing and I owe him an awful lot. And the kindest thing for me to do was to allow him to be a horse. After owning him for 3 or 4 years, I decided to retire him. And I know a lot of people would be like, but why do you keep retiring your horses? And the honest answer is that they've given me so much and they owe me nothing and I owe them everything. And if I'm honest, I also wouldn't sleep well at night knowing how awful some of the people are in the horsey world. So, so if you sell a horse as a happy hacker and then you see it a few weeks later being belted around at a show, wouldn't do it, wouldn't sleep at night, and my horses are my family, which is the most important point that I need to make. And here he is, loving life as a horse. In the summer of 2015, I saw this little face pop up on my Facebook, and well, obviously the rest was history, but I just can't get over how similar to Niffy he looks in that photo. So this is George. He's a 15-1 and a bit Connemara, as known as Melik Island Cloud. He was 5 years old when I got him, and I got him in 2015. George had not long been over from Ireland when I went to try him out, and I don't think he'd long been backed anyway. I remember when I first got him, it took about 3 people to hold him just for me to get my foot in the stirrup. And yeah, similarly, I think the first year of owning him, I was like, oh my god, this horse is a nightmare. He would just tank off around the school and just do laps and laps and laps. And here he is in his first ever lesson, doing his first ever grid. I can't get over how small and how dappled he was. And here we are in another lesson. Don't think he fancied it this day. And this was George's first ever competition. I'd never counted him round a course of jumps and he won it. And this was his first ever dressage test, didn't go as well. And this was his first ever jumping competition. Don't be fooled, I think there was only like 2 people in the class. And then yeah, we just spent a lot of time getting to know each other, just doing little bits and bobs, going to a few shows with Aragorn, which did not go well because at this point they were best friends and they spent the majority of their class yelling at each other and napping. And I could talk all day long about George. George is just the most special little horse that I have ever met. He will always make you smile. He would be like the perfect therapy horse just because there's just something about him that just makes you feel like warm and fuzzy inside. I can't describe it, but everyone that meets him falls in love with his personality instantly. And then we had a really, really successful, fun few years competing together. He won the national championships at the Hicksted Sunshine Tour. He won a few dressage championships, loads of jumping. Literally, this horse is just unreal. And then suddenly we were in a position where we didn't even know if George was going to have a ridden career anymore. So he had a year, almost 2 years off work, 1 year solidly on box rest, which is when I decided to get this guy. So this is Niffy, as known as Tonrani Maxwell. He was smaller than George when I got him. He's now overtaken him and he is 6 years old now. And I think that photo was taken maybe a week before he got a splint, and then a few weeks later he had choke. So in between dealing with all of that, I didn't really specify when I got Niffy, he wasn't at all broken. He had hardly been handled, wasn't really used to anything. So I just spent a lot of time just doing groundwork with him, getting him used to having a saddle on, and then just sort of getting on and off and having a little mooch, but we never really done a lot. So yeah, my trainer helped me back him. So we've backed him in March 2020. I asked him to help because I wanted him to have the best possible start. And yeah, since then we've just been doing little bits and bobs. We've been to a few jumping competitions, done a bit of dressage. And yeah, I'm also so happy to report that George is back and he's in full work. He done his first ever British novice this year, and I'm hoping that 2021 COVID allowing, will be a really good year for us. So I am sorry that this has taken so long to post, and I'm sorry that it's quite a long video, but I hope you enjoyed it.